Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be doing something a little different today. It's not going to be a typical celebrity horoscope that I'm going to be dissertating and talking about, but this is going to be actually a chart of the Jodi Arias Mistrial decision. Now, it is somewhat speculative because I don't know the precise time when the jurors came to that conclusion and they officially announced it was going to be a mistrial and that it was indeed a hung jury. But I know the date was May 23rd and it was in Phoenix, I believe, but also this was at I'm going to put it at about 12 p.m., which would give the rising sign, put it at Virgo, very early Virgo at 12 p.m. on that date. And first I want to talk about the Virgo rising part of this whole deal, is that, obviously I believe this could indicate that the jurors were very analytical and very attentive to details, very punctilious with them, and really probably left virtually no stone unturned. So there was probably a lot of extensive analysis in this particular, collection of jurors. Now the sun was in Gemini, and along with some few other planets, so you had a strong saturation of Gemini influence in this, as far as perhaps this, this decision, and how in connection with how the jurors were talking and associating with each other during this period. And it could indicate to me that they probably were really talking very extensively. A number of them were probably very loquacious, talked really deep about about their feelings on this matter, and in terms of whether they felt that Jodi Arias should get, whether it be the death penalty or the the life in prison. So that's another thing that they were probably very well able to articulate to each other very well their thoughts on this. The moon was in Scorpio, and I could see maybe the moon being in Scorpio for this chart of this decision or what have you could show that maybe these deliberations were very, very intense, and fixity in the emotions of these people as well, but controlled at the same time. In this chart, the majority of the planets were above the horizon, and this shows to me that these jurors were more likely than not very objective, extroverted in their own, right, I guess, not holding back, and they don't believe they really allowed much extraneous influences or outside influences to impact their decision-making process. Now the preponderance of planets were on the left side of the chart in this mistrial, and that shows to me that the jurors were probably very independent in their thinking, and they weren't impacted by the other jurors, and they weren't necessarily swayed just because one juror went one way, that meant that they were definitely going to go along that way as well. It shows to me that these people at least were basically essentially very independent in their thought process in terms of what they were talking about, and their as far as the decision. Uranus was in the 8th house at the time of this this chart, and the jury, Uranus being in the 8th house, the jury probably was very aware and cognizant of Jodi Arias's bizarre sexual behavior, and this probably played, could have figured prominently ultimately in their, in their decision, I believe, and this could have been discussed immensely in the deliberations. Now, Neptune was in Pisces, conjunct Pisces on the 7th house cusp, which shows that it could be possible maybe on some level now that maybe the jurors were maybe a little bit confused, and as far as the relationship aspect of this whole thing was, as far as Jodi Arias and Travis Alexander, that, you know, who was real, were both people ever, you know, were they at this time were both somewhat infatuated with each other? Maybe was it just Arias who had the obsession and Alexander definitely wanted this whole thing off? Or is there a part some of these jurors maybe thought that possibly, I'm just guessing on this, maybe thought that Alexander might have had, you know, a little bit more, you know, as far as, you know, feelings toward Jodi that was, you know, than otherwise indicated, you know, as some examples. And I believe, you know, this could have been factored, you know, somehow played some role, you know, in their, you know, strongly in their deliberations and in, you know, in their, you know, into the, you know, the hung jury. Now, 5 planets were in masculine signs, and there were 5 that were in feminine signs in this chart. Now, this shows that there could very well have been a balance, an equilibrium between extroverted jurors and introverted ones, which is, I believe, always good to have that balance, so you have a vantage point and perception, you know, from different, you know, varied types of people, so it's not just a very, you know, one-sided affair, you know, as far as the deliberations went. And what I want to get at now is the, I guess, you know, the time when June 20th comes, assuming that they don't make a plea agreement prior to this. You know, as I'm sure most of you know out there, June 20th, which is coming up in a week, is going to be, you know, maybe more likely than not, the date that will determine whether Jodi Arias will actually, you know, I guess you could say, be extricated completely from, you know, the possibility of getting the death sentence, because she would avoid going, you know, getting that trial again to determine what the punishment or sentencing would be. I'm looking at it like that's going to be 29 degrees Gemini on June 20th. And a lot of times, natally and predictively, what the 29th degree could indicate or signify is that it could be the end of something. The fact that we're approaching, you know, the sun in Cancer, could it be, you know, I'm thinking maybe, you know, this might not be something that a lot of people would you know, would be in favor of. Could there be a plea agreement where maybe Jodi's life is going to be spared? Will this whole, I guess we could say, this Jodi Arias, you know, trial and, you know, her, you know, the saga of Jodi Arias, will it officially pretty much come to an end this time? I think it could be possible, due to the fact that it will be 29 degrees Gemini, and it will be at the end of something. Gemini is also a sign of communication, so that could indicate that there will be, you know, possibly extensive talking, and to determine whether this is going to go, you know, to the next phase, which would be, I believe, July 18th, to determine if she's going to get, you know, another trial to determine the punishment, or if this is actually going to end. And I have a feeling it may end on this date for that reason. Now, the Sun, you know, nearly in Cancer, coupled with Mercury and Venus in Cancer, perhaps there might be some sympathy directed at Jodi Arias at this time, and she might very well avoid, you know, that potential, you know, death penalty, if she could avoid the, you know, the new trial. So it shows me that it could be very well possible that this, you know, this might happen. And transiting Venus will be conjuncting her 4th house in this period. And, you know, there's, you know, obviously, I'm sure there's multiple ways you can look at this. It could show that what happens, you know, to Jodi Arias, you know, on this date, you know, could impact, you know, have something to do with her, the end of her life. You know, Venus, you know, hitting the 4th house could be something that would indicate, you know, a peaceful setting or aura at your home. Now, right now, even though she's incarcerated, from what I'm understanding, she's very compatible with her inmates there, and it's probably, it's a very, it's advantageous for tranquil and peaceful existence, right, as far as where she's at right now. But I believe as well the fact that Venus will be conjuncting that on that particular day is going to show, maybe, it can signify that the latter part of her life will be peaceful, and that could mean that her life will be spared. And even though she's gonna, maybe be confined to jail the rest of her life with no possibility of parole, she would, it could be very well a peaceful setting, at least for, as far as an inmate is concerned. And like I said before, she's getting hospitality there, and a lot of the people are enamored with her, and looking at her like she's a celebrity. That it's almost like people are honored to be in her presence and in her circle of friends. Now I think Jodi Arias is seen to be possibly a big schemer and manipulator, and she might be already playing these people, I believe, very possibly maybe to get protection from these inmates. So that's another thing. Well, people, that will conclude this YouTube astrological segment for Jodi Arias and her, I guess the chart of her mistrial. And stay tuned next time, where I'll be continuing my aspect segment on YouTube. Until next time, people, stay well.